All right. Welcome to the Rise Up podcast. And I'm your host, Jonah Mitchell. And on this show, I do my best to help simplify everything that goes into the weight loss, fat loss, building muscle, overall health journey and make it make sense for where you're at in your life and how you can start always finding progress. I feel like I changed my intro up every single day, but or every single day, every single podcast. But the gist is for me to help show you exactly how to get to where you want to go without getting in your own way. Because I like to remind people that having the goals you want is a lot easier than you think it is. And I want to put a emphasis, it's a lot easier than you think, because a lot of times you're doing a lot of shit that doesn't actually align with you and doesn't actually help you where you're at. And makes it much harder to stay consistent. But today we're going to go over the process of leaning out, toning up, whatever the words you want to use, really just improving body composition, right? Taking your shirt off, feeling comfortable in bathing suits, whatever it is. We're going to talk about that today and how much simpler it really is. And if you enjoy today's episode, if you how much simpler, Jesus, how much simpler it really is. And if you enjoy today's episode, if you learn something, if it helps shift your perspective, please do me a favor, share it with at least one person, or let me know that it helped you in even a small way, right? My entire goal is to help you no matter where you're at. So even if I never speak to you, I hope I just help you get a little bit closer to where you want to go. I'm dry mouth. Maybe that's why I'm stuttering so much this morning. All right, let's kick things off. So when we're trying to lean out, all right, a lot of these how-to episodes, I want to give you the basic the basis understanding first, right? It's not just here's your workout, here's your macros, have fun, right? Because if we do that, that's cool. I've done it in the past. I've seen results from that. Thousands, hundreds of thousands of people have seen results by just being handed, this is what you do, have fun. But if they don't understand what they should be doing, they don't understand why they're doing what they're doing, then it's harder to maintain. Because now if we remove those pieces, or those pieces stop working as effectively as they used to, then well, how do I go? Where do I go from here? How do I pivot? How do I adjust? Right. And this is where it can get very difficult to maintain. Right. So I want you to understand what it is you need to tell your body in order to see the results that you want. Okay, and the first basic understanding is that it's been a while since I've talked about this, but maybe in this regard, I should say, but your body's always doing what you tell it to do, whether you're aware of it or not. If you're not in a place where you're happy with your body composition, you're not in a great place mentally about it, you told your body to do that, right? Barring certain surgeries and medical conditions, right? This is all just like, hey, life happened. We lost our consistency. We weren't able to make the best choices all the time, and we're in a place where we're just not happy, right? There's always exceptions to the rule where like you didn't actually ask for to be in the situation. Well, not like we're asking for it, but we are responsible for it, whether we're aware of it or not. Right. And that's why you're here, to understand, like, hey, even though you're in a place where you're not happy, you can do something about it. You can change it, right? Because you can, no matter what you're dealing with, you can make changes to get to where you want to go. All right. And because our body's always listening, it's understanding the situation, understanding what the signals are, what the stimulus is, right? A lot of us are very sedentary. Very sedentary. So if that's the normal, that's what the signal is going to be taken in consistently, and our body's going to hear that over and over and over again. If we have a low protein diet, if we don't challenge ourselves appropriately enough in our exercise, it's going to hear all those things and not likely challenge or change the way that we would like it to, right? So our central nervous system is basically taking all these signals and just adapting and changing to accommodate to the environment that is being told to do. All right. So because of this, right, you have the power to make the changes. You have the power to put your body in yourself in the situation that's going to make the stimulus change. So your body has to adapt to the stimulus. We are the most adaptable creatures, and it's amazing what you can accomplish what our bodies can accomplish, right? We can survive in deserts at sea. We can do so many crazy things because our body can adapt to literally anything. Well, not literally anything. Any livable situation, survivable situation, our body can adapt to. I should say that. We can't adapt to living in the sun yet. Maybe one day we can do that, right? But we need to understand the signals that we're sending, okay? This is why training is super important. All right. There's the big sides of the equation that determine body composition and body changes, right? Fitness and nutrition. Okay, we're going to split these up for right now. We're going to talk about the fitness side first. All right. This is something that I never truly understood as I had my athletic background. I just did what everyone told me to do. I never understood why, right? We used percentages, we used RPE, we went through 5 days a week training, 2 days a week training, 3 days a week training, 2 days barbell work, 1 day dumbbell work. It was just assortment of things, but there was never really an understanding why, other than we're getting stronger to play better in sports, in football. That's no knock on any of my strength coaches that I had. It's just, if you're working with people like well over 100 people on a football team, it's not very easy to communicate every little thing that they're doing and why, right? Especially if you're kind of a knucklehead and not paying attention. You're just kind of showing up so you don't get fined. So, but through that, I had a lot of good programming that led to a lot of awesome results for me, where I got to the strongest I'd ever been. Squat lifting, squatting over 500 pounds, deadlifting over 500 pounds, getting my 225 bench rep max to like 23, 24 reps, benching 315 pounds. All those were relatively around the same time when my training was super, super intense. Again, I didn't understand what I was doing. Now that I look back, a lot of the training was based off of a very simple principle, and I'm sure it's talked about a lot. It needs to be highlighted way more often, but the principle is progressive overload. All right. And this is where you consistently send a signal with the training that you're doing that you have to get a little bit stronger, right? So let's use percentage numbers, for example, right? A percentage or RPE numbers. These pieces of, they say, 75% of your 1 rep max, right? So you have a block of training that starts at 75% your first week, second week is 85%, third week is 95%, right? Progressively, as the block of training goes on, you would lift heavier and heavier and heavier based off that percentage, right? And that would be your progressive overload. So a lot of people get very, very confused when they're training, and they feel like they have to do something different every time they exercise. Shock the system, right? If you keep your body guessing, it's just going to adapt and build more and more muscle. However, consistently, studies have shown this in programming out there, when you keep it relatively simple and your training blocks are about 3 to 6 weeks long, where you're doing very similar exercises, but generally progressing. It doesn't have to be at 10% every single week. Every training block could be a little bit different, but that was just a very quick example, where you're just progressively doing the same movements for a period of time. Your body's getting a consistent signal that this is a stimulus we have to get better at. This is a stimulus that we have to get better at. This is a stimulus that we have to get better at. And I like to break these blocks up in strength focus, muscle endurance focus, or hypertrophy focuses, right? Each one, like strength, is going to be focused more on weight than on reps. Muscle endurance is going to be about 8 to 12 reps. So weight's probably going to drop down a little bit more, but still relatively heavy. And then hypertrophy is 12 to 20 reps, where weight is no longer the focus. It's more the reps and trying to get to the higher level. Doesn't always have to be 20, but again, just giving you general examples. And when you have those stimulus consistently and you send it over and over and over again, you say you're just focusing on strength, then the progress you can see is generally easier to discern, right? Because I have one focus for a few weeks that I'm going to try and lift as heavy as possible safely by progressively getting stronger, adding 5, adding 10 pounds per week to my exercises. And that progressive overload is sending the signal to your central nervous system. It's like, hey, you're lifting something heavy. right? You're lifting something heavy, and if we do the same weight over for just continue to never increase weights, we just do the same weight over and over and over again. Eventually, that signal is going to be like, all right, well, we only need this much muscle to lift this much weight, so we don't necessarily need to be adding more, right? Progressive overload is meant to send that signal. Well, okay, we've lifted this weight, right? Now we can take this, we've lifted that weight, now we're adding 5 or 10 pounds to an exercise. Now there's more stimulus, there's a progressive, there's more of a load, a higher progressive load on our body. So now we need to get stronger to accommodate for that new load, right? And this is where your body now gets the signal that it needs to produce more muscle. So if we feel weaker or unstable, it's like, okay, we need to get better for this new environment. We need to get better and stronger to accommodate for this situation. And that's where more muscle begins to be produced, or the signal that muscle is important, because you're progressively adding more weight, you're progressively getting better, you're progressively getting stronger, say in the strength block, right? And because of that signal, and you're constantly challenging it, right? Some weeks you can't always add weight. That's okay too. But when you're getting to, if you're truly trying to improve your body composition, lean out, tone up, right? It's not only about working out to failure, working out to exhaustion. It's working to get stronger, because then you have more muscle on your frame, because your body is producing more to accommodate to the stimulus, right? And that's important. Like, this is the first side of the equation. Our body needs enough of a signal said to it that it can start building more muscle, or it's necessary to start building more muscle, because the environment outside is dictating it. The environment is telling us that we are needing to continuously add more muscle to accommodate for the heavier reps or the heavier workload, right? And this is where the production of muscle starts to go. Okay, this is very, very important to establish, because really before we even get to that stuff, we can talk about your programming and progressive overload, I should have started here first. We need to have some sort of consistency, right? It's very easy to be consistent with the environment we're currently in when it's not ideal to our current goals. If we are very sedentary, don't have ideal training situation, and we don't have much movement, it's very easy to stay in that environment. It's very easy for our body to get used to, or it's very easy to stay there because our body's used to it, right? When we're trying to change it, it's mainly just about changing the new normal and establishing consistency outside of that normal, right? So that's the first thing, because progressive overload and training blocks and proper programming, none of that fucking matters if you can't be consistent. Because you can be consistent for a few weeks and then not show up for 6, and then we're back doing something that we usually do, which has got us in a place where we are right now. So now we need to understand that we just need to establish the consistency boat, get the ball rolling in the direction that we want it to, so that we can ultimately get to when we get to where we want to go, we can sustain it. Because our normal is we show up and exercise in a way that is appropriate to our goals. If we're not where we want to, if we don't have the muscle tone or definition that we want yet, yeah, it's harder to build muscle than it is to maintain it. But once you have it, it's really easy to maintain. But it can feel slow, especially if we're not consistent. So I want you to understand that the exercise portion, it needs to be appropriately challenging. And this is where I'm going to kind of get a little bit in the mindset side of things, where if you're leaving reps, if you're supposed to get 10 reps, but you always stop at like 8 or 9, right? If you can add more weight, but you're kind of second guessing yourself, I'll keep that 10 pounds off today, right? That kind of thinking is not bad if you truly need it. But if you're looking to challenge your body and get to your goals, I would start questioning those thoughts, because that's something I struggle with a lot. I'm going to do a little bit of a tangent. My goals when I was, this is something I still struggle with. I have to remind myself of when I'm training right now, because it was a bad habit that I had when I was playing. Like, I never used to believe in how you do one thing is how you do everything, because the one thing I truly liked about football was the games, practice, training, for it all. I just couldn't stand meetings. I couldn't stand, but I showed up to them because I had to, right? But in my head, I was like, if there's 11 days that I cared about the most, and that 11th day, or those 11 days were the games, and man, I went balls to the wall, all out for the games. wasn't prepared enough because I wasn't training as hard as I should have. I wasn't preparing as hard as I should have, and I was super upset every time I didn't perform to the level I could. I never looked in the mirror and said, "Hey, it's because you're not showing up in those other areas that are going to help you show up better for those days," right? Because mentally, when I was in those training blocks, when I was sitting there, I was like, "Man, I hate this. It's so uncomfortable. So uncomfortable." I'd always stop a couple of reps short. I'd always, oh man, maybe I could add 10% more, but I'm comfortable here, right? If we don't challenge our body every now and again, if we don't second guess, like, is this actually aligning with me right now, or am I just trying to? For lack of a better term, I don't like calling people lazy or telling anyone we're lazy, but like we all are inherently lazy, right? And in those moments, I did want to be lazy, right? Or when we're doing suicides at practice, and it's, if you miss the line, you make the whole team redo it. Man, I fucking hated that so much. But there's times I was like, man, how close can I get to that line without actually touching it, without looking like I actually touched it? Because I don't want to exert any extra energy that I need to, because I'm lazy. I'm being lazy. I'm getting in my own way of what I think I want, right? And this is, again, just about the tangent. When you're in these blocks and you're thinking, man, I don't need to get that last rep in. I don't need to add that extra weight. That little challenge that we can easily just skip out on could be a very beneficial. Well, actually, it adds up over time, right? Because if you miss 2 reps for a month, right, and every workout that you do, we'll say that, for the sake of math brevity in my head, because that's a lot of math, say you do 3 sets of 10 on squats, right? And you squat twice a week, right? So, and you're skimming out on 2 reps. So you only do three sets of 8. So you do 16. Crap, maybe I made this too hard. Anyway, whatever those 2 reps, and you do it twice a week, and you multiply that by the 4 weeks in the month, whatever that amount is, because whoever is listening to this and does math way better than I do quickly, you're missing out on that amount of volume, that amount of extra work that could have helped amplify the results that you're getting, right? And it doesn't feel like much when you're in those moments. It's 1 rep, it's 2 reps, right? It's 5 pounds, that's okay. But then you compound it over the month or 3 months of your training, and you're missing out on a lot of extra stimulus. I don't want to say gains, but stimulus that could help enhance the gains that you achieve over time, right? So that's why I'm trying to give you the understanding. That's why I'm trying to help you understand what you're telling your body. Your body's always listening, right? And how you do one thing is how you do everything. So just be more cautious or conscious of when you're training. If you can get that extra rep, that last rep, even though it's hard, but you you can do it, that's fine. You want to do that. You want to be able to do that and stand up and say, well, that was a hard rep, but I'm glad I stood up from it. I'm glad I got it up, because those things compound. That's going to help you in the long run, because you're consistent with the stimulus. When the stimulus is consistent and we're hitting those numbers, and we're showing up consistently, right? And we're in appropriate training blocks and we're progressing in those training blocks. Well, if you want a good like framework, I would go to Mind Pump Media. I use a lot of their templates for programming for my clients. They're great. Not sponsored, by the way. I would love to one of these days, but like their programming, it's their frameworks, right? It's not like follow it to a T, but it just helps give you an idea of how to structure workouts and blocks of training so that you can know what you're focusing on, what you're getting out of, right? So anyway, once we have that side of the equation, that's just one side, right? Now we need the food to tell our body how to adapt to the stimulus, right? Because you can be training hard. Sorry, I need a sip of water. You can be training hard, but if you're eating in a surplus, you're going to be building muscle, right? Because muscle is expensive. But if you're eating in a crazy high surplus, doesn't matter the stimulus, you're still going to gain body fat, right? If we eat more into maintenance and we're eating enough protein, then we can start seeing body recomposition at the same average weight that we stay at, and we can start seeing how our body lets go a little bit more fat cells and starts building more lean muscle tissue, because it's not like stressing out about storing extra energy or tearing down extra tissue like you would be in a deficit, right? So I get ahead of myself because I want to really help you understand that the signal from our exercise, from our training, is important. But if we don't feed our body appropriately, if we don't recover with our food appropriately, it's not going to change much. You're going to feel like you're doing everything right and not seeing the results. So here's another thing that I need you to understand when it comes to understanding food and how to see the results that we want. Muscle is not essential for survival. It's very frustrating when I'm telling clients about it's very frustrating when we see where a lot of people end up or are at and not happy with their body composition, and then we're talking about like what it takes to start seeing body composition improvements. We'll think, even though we are very adaptable, we're the most adaptable creatures, our body still lives in hunter-gatherer times, where muscle was not the essential function. Our body could adapt and build muscle if the stimulus was consistent enough to require more strength over and over and over again. That's why we can develop muscle. But this is why muscle is one of the first things torn down if it's not being properly supported, if we're not feeding it. Body fat is essential for survival. There's times where we would go with no food whatsoever, so our body utilized body fat stores to help get us through those tough times where food was a little bit more scarce. Right now, we don't have to hunt, we don't have to gather our food, we don't have to leave our homes if we do not truly want to, and that's crazy. But our body hasn't adapted to that stimulus yet. It still sees as abundance of food, store it for later. Scarcity of food, survive off of body fat stores, or the most abundant source of energy, because muscle is actually just ATP stores, ATP and glucose, which is just energy for your body, right? And it's very abundant. Our body loves that kind of energy because it's quick, it's accessible very, very rapidly, right? This is why a lot of people experience, like when they go on diets where they slash their calories and drastically increase their cardio, and they don't really see body composition improvements. They see more like a skinny fat type thing developing because their body isn't being supported nutritionally to hold on to the muscle mass, the muscle tissue that they have, but they're being and so it's being told, your body's being told to tear down the muscle tissue quickly, hold on to or be resistant to fat loss. It's not impossible to lose fat, but if you're truly wanting to improve your body composition, when we have less muscle mass, we become a smaller, somewhat fatter version of ourselves, because then our body fat percentage goes up even if the scale goes down, right? And this is because muscle is not essential. If it's not supported, if the signal isn't being told that muscle is necessary, muscle is important, is an important resource to us, it will be the first thing torn down in any diet phase, protocol, whatever you go through, right? So how we avoid this first when it comes to the nutrition side is feeding the muscle appropriately. This is required. This is called protein synthesis. You don't need to remember that, but it's just the amount of protein needed to get to the threshold that we have enough amino acids in our system to build lean muscle tissue and prioritize fat loss over muscle loss, right? Most people, it's about 0.6 grams per pound of body weight is usually like the bare minimum amount to get over that threshold of protein synthesis where muscle loss is no longer the main function. It doesn't make it impossible to lose muscle mass if you're in a deficit focus, right? But it makes it it doesn't make it as easy because there's enough muscle, there's enough protein in your system to not be muscle wasting when you're going through that diet, right? If we're looking to improve body composition, more amino acids are necessary, because in more amino acids, it's going to be, hey, muscle is even more important because of based off our diet, based off the stimulus that is being told. We have a lot of amino acids in our system. We have a lot of building blocks for muscle tissue. So obviously, based off of the food that's in our system and the training that we're doing, muscle does not need to be torn down, right? Muscle needs to be retained because of the stimulus of our training and because we're eating enough. And eating enough to improve body composition anywhere from, well, again, you can improve body composition at 0.6, but if we want ideal body composition improvements, is about 0.8 grams to 1 gram per pound of body weight. Sometimes higher if your aesthetic goal is very, very severe, like bodybuilders are like 1.2 grams to like 1.5. But I like starting on the lower end and working our way up until you find a sweet spot, right? And if you're in somewhere in that range, you're good. You're golden, all right? You don't have to be like, everyone needs to eat this number. That's not the fucking case. Like, everyone's like, just tell me the number. I was like, I don't fucking know your number until I see what you're doing. And based off your goal and what helps you feel good and what's going to allow you to start seeing the results that you want, It's very trial and error-esque, right? But we have ranges to get us going in the right direction. So eating enough protein, feed the muscle, telling the system that that this is necessary is very, very, very important, right? Do that, right? If you get that big pillar, the only thing else you have to worry about when it comes to your intake is your total calories, right? I don't we can go here's the order of importance when it comes to macros. Macros. Total calories. If you want to lose weight, eat less than you burn. If you want to gain weight, eat more than you burn, right? But your calories are made up of your macros, right? Protein is the second most important. Enough protein in our system leads to that muscle building, muscle retention signal, right? Prioritizing fat loss above everything else, right? Carbs, or I'm sorry, fat is the third most important when it comes to dietary fat. Dietary fat is responsible for hormone production and just helping our body recover. And if your total calories are about 20 to 30% dietary fat, you're in a good place overall. And then your protein would be about, if you're following that 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of body weight, it's anywhere from like 25 to 40% of your total calories. And then your carbs, which are super fun fact, carbs are not essential for life. Protein and dietary fat are essential. Protein for amino acids and for certain vitamins and minerals, dietary fat for hormone production and stimulation. Carbs are extra energy, right? If we cut out carbs from our diet, we will not be missing out on a lot of nutrients like we would if we were cut out protein or dietary fat, right? So anyway, but still, it doesn't make carbs bad, right? Anywhere from 20 to 40% of your total calories, or really whatever is left over after you count for protein, after you count for a fat, whatever's left over would be your carb goal, right? This is, like I said, anywhere from 20 to 50% of your overall calories. Everyone is different. I say all that because when you count for total calories and your protein goal, it doesn't really matter where your carbs and fats fall. And people tend to kind of see where they gravitate towards. And a lot of people get scared of dietary fat. It's like, oh my God, my fat's so high because MyFitnessPal will give like a red fucking bar. It's like, this is too high. It's like, no, it doesn't matter. As long as our calories and protein are in an appropriate place. Like for me, I don't digest a lot of fats very well. So my carb intake is genuinely higher. I also accommodate, have a hyperactive lifestyle where I'm playing flag football. I do jujitsu. I train every week. I'm walking somewhere between 6,000 to 10,000 steps on a regular basis. So, my signal of active lifestyle is being supported by my food as well. And this is, again, not to like, oh, look at what I've done. I've had to spend a lot of fucking time figuring this out. I don't want it to take you nearly as long as it took me. But anyway, feeding your body enough protein and then making it simple when you just focus on your overall calories and protein. It doesn't matter where your carbs and fats fall, because your overall calories are then going to dictate a surplus, maintenance, or deficit. So this whole thing started to tone up and lean out, right? A lot of the time it comes from being in a deficit, right? To shed body fat. So if that's the goal, right? Ideally, we want to be training in a way that's going to elicit a muscle building response or a muscle retention response, because building muscle can be expensive. And if we don't have enough muscle on our frame, then we might not see the body composition improvements we like, but that may be a like how to bulk episode for later. But everyone still has a certain amount of body fat or muscle mass on their body. And when we want to lean out and tone up, like most of us have some amount of muscle already. So eliciting a deficit response based off your total calories, right? Eating less than you burn, but still supporting your body throughout that process. So eating enough protein, not in such a drastic deficit where you feel starving, constantly thinking about your food all the time and making it hard to sustain your goal, right? Usually somewhere between 200 to 500 calories, right? I like to start on the lower side first and then get aggressive if we still feel good, and then take a break every now and again to just nullify any negative biofeedback, which is like constant hunger cues, low energy, headaches, migraine, headaches, and low energy. I think I said low energy, terrible sleep, anything that like classifies as I don't feel like myself, which a deficit could elicit if it's too extreme and stresses are a bit too high. but yeah, and that if you do that appropriately, and that's the signal, right? And this goes all back to the signal. What is the signal that we're trying to say? And then we are consistent with that 2 to 500 calorie deficit. We're eating enough protein. And we are training with that stimulus consistently, and we're not getting our own way. We're getting the most of what we can get out of our training, whatever we allot that time to, right? And you're just staying consistent. This is that's the whole thing. There's nothing crazy. There's no magic button. It's not just all genetics. Like, genetics do play a role, right, in certain areas, but it's just about consistently doing the work and just showing up, even if you don't see the results that you think within the time that you think you should. Because if you've been struggling with your goals for decades, like, it's not going to get done in 3 months. You're not going to get to where you want to go in 3 months. Like, that's just unrealistic. It's just, and it's a huge thing. You cannot be unrealistic with this, right? If you're very quick to self-sabotage or get annoyed with yourself for your lack of progress, and it's only been a few months, and you don't give yourself the context of realizing how long it took you to get to this place where you're unhappy, right? Like, you're making it a lot easier for you to stop showing up and not be consistent. And then when we stop having that consistent stimulus with our nutrition, with our fitness, right, then the environment goes back to what it usually is, which is where it puts us in a state of we're not happy with. This is where we get stuck. This is where we get trapped. This is where we feel like it's a lot harder than it actually is, right? But this is where I wanted to make this podcast to help you see that, to help you start changing that, right? Because sometimes if you go in a deficit and you want to, like, lean out and tone up, and you're, like, losing body fat, you're losing weight, and you don't see the ideal scenario that you thought you were going to, guess what? You're not done. Maybe you have a new path moving forward, and that's the real process. Like this, we're never truly done. My big goal is to get to a person to where they don't need a coach anymore, where they can listen to themselves and show up for themselves consistently and know how to make adjustments and to accommodate for the things that are going on in their life. But if we're not seeing the results that we thought we were going to see, well, maybe we didn't have the actual foundation that we thought. Maybe we should go on a bulk and intentionally increase our calories while keeping the training stimulus high, so the weight that we do gain is still prioritized on muscle mass and muscle development. This is how bodybuilders get so lean and defined, is that they're not done after one diet. They're not done after one cut. They go through multiple bulks and cuts to get to the point where their body fat percentage can be very low and they can see every single muscle. But that's very extreme. Like most people want to walk around lifestyle lean. I stole this from one of my coaches, Mike Milner, who has a fantastic podcast. And I'm blanking it right now. Oh my goodness. But just look up Mike Milner, and I think it's his coaching company is Pop, and I think it's oh no, his podcast is Mind Over Macros. There it is, I believe. And his podcast is great. But lifestyle lean is living a lifestyle where we improve our body composition. We see that muscle definition. We see that muscle tone because we're training appropriately. We're staying consistent, right? We're challenging ourselves enough in our current situations, right? Not all of us can dedicate 110% to our physique and our health, right? That's okay, right? But in the time that we do a lot, we do our best to challenge ourselves appropriately, not kill ourselves, challenge ourselves. And when we're thinking, going back to the training one, I want you to think, when you're hitting your reps, when you're doing your sets and your reps, I want you to think, I want you to get to a point where you could do a couple more reps, but they would be challenging, right? That's like in your head when you're thinking, like, I don't know if I should add more weight. It's like, if you add more weight, could you finish the last couple reps and maybe have a couple more in the chamber, but they would be challenging. Like, that's the appropriate signal. That's the appropriate stimulus. And when it comes to how often you should be hitting your protein goals and staying consistent with your calorie numbers, most of the time, 80% of the time, right? It doesn't have to be all the time unless you have an extreme aesthetic goal, right? But those are exceptions. When we're thinking about lifestyle lean and maintenance, right? Establish a foundation where we support our body consistently, and then make room that 20% of the time for food, for engagements, for travel that allows us to live our life and maintain our results. Because what we do most of the time, that 80% of the time, is sending the signal to our body that it wants to build and maintain lean muscle, right? I even touched about hydration, like, and sleep, but the stress we put on our body is really fucking important. But the recovery that we give our body is equal to, if not more important, because if we don't recover, then it's even harder to see the results. So don't just go all in on training, right? Sleep, the more you train, the more you should be sleeping. Everyone says the weak don't sleep, or whatever, or only the or the weak don't sleep, or only the weak sleep, or some shit like that. Sleep is so dope. If you want to truly enhance your results, take your sleep seriously, because the more you recover from your training, the harder you can push the next time around, and then you can get more of a stimulus out, and then this is where your gains continue to compound, right? It's very simple, right? It's nothing complicated. It's nothing like so complex that no one will ever understand it, right? It's a lot easier than most people think. It's just we get in our own way because of our lack of understanding, our lack of patience, and our unrealistic expectations. Like I said at the start of the show, I want to make this simpler for you, and making it simpler is getting out of your own way, understanding what you're doing, and then just keep doing it, and then questioning your thoughts. Am I actually showing up the way I want to, or am I falling back to old tendencies? It takes practice. Even someone who is a professional who helps people call out their own bullshit on a regular basis, I still have to question my own thoughts. Like, I had a few cancellations on calls today as I'm recording this podcast. And I was just being a lazy piece of shit. Literally, I was just sitting there like, I know I should be doing it. I know I should be doing it. I know I should be doing it. But I just kept finding something else to do, something else to do, until I had to actually stop and talk to myself. And one of my favorite sayings right now is the crazy people are the ones who don't talk to themselves. And I had to say, it's not going to be that bad. You're going to feel better when it's done. Go sit down at your computer and record this damn podcast. And I challenge myself to think a different way, right? And it doesn't go away once we get to a point where we're showing up the best way we can. We're training consistently. There's still going to be days where we don't want to. There's still going to be days where we're going to question it. There's still going to be days where life gets really hard and we're not going to want to show up, and that's okay. We just get better at reminding ourselves how we want to feel, where we're currently at, where we want to go, and then showing up, talking to ourselves, and reminding ourselves of we're still going to get it done the best way we can. Because the more we can stay consistent, because consistency is the most important thing above all else. Like, if you take one thing away from this whole thing, stay fucking consistent. And after you do that, everything will kind of, not everything will right itself, but after you have consistency, it'll just make it a little bit easier to apply the nutrition, the fit, and like the specific types of training and all that fun stuff. But yeah, I didn't cover like HIIT style training because, you know, I wanted to focus on progressive overload because most people can do like resistance training and progressively overload for a long time with proper guidance, proper coaching. As long as they're doing the form correctly. HIIT training, even though it's very effective at burning calories, not always very forgiving on the joints in our body, and could lead to injuries that make it hard for us to maintain consistency. So maybe I'll do a podcast episode on that, but I just want to go over the big pillars of what I teach, what I've had to learn myself, what I teach my clients, especially a lot of my clients who I've recently started coaching who are in the CrossFit world. I don't like really sit there and monitor all that much, but I want them to understand what they should be taking away mentally and physically from their training. And I still give my clients like ideas and stuff for training and how to block it if they're not in CrossFit, you know. So if you have questions about that, feel free to reach out. I would go check out Mind Pump Media and look at their workout programs. They're awesome. And yeah, they're probably better than most of the free resources on the internet. But yeah, I think I'm gonna end this episode today. It was a little bit more of a technical episode, a little bit of mindset stuff thrown in there because, you know, I can't help myself. But yeah, I hope you learned something. I hope you found this valuable. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you on the next one.